Remember. So I forget stuff a lot. If you ask my wife, she'll tell you that I am very prone to forgetting things. Now, part of it, I think, is my ADHD, which means that, so kind of my superpower is I can focus on something really intensely for a really long period of time to the exclusion of everything else, which sometimes is very useful. But the flip side of that, the liability is that while I'm focusing on something very intently and exclusively, I'm oblivious to whatever else is going on in the world around me. And so I forget things a lot. I'll just share two stories. So Sabbath morning, you guys know how busy Sabbath morning can be. Extra stress and pressure. You got to get out the door. You've got to have clothes that are clean, and you have to smell good. And, if you're a pastor's family with a whole bunch of kids, the sermon's got to be ready, and the kids have to be out the door at the same time in the car, and there's potluck food. And, it's. So Sabbath morning, we're finally, all out the door together. It seems like a miracle. And then as we're headed to the car, I realize that I do not have my phone. So I go back in the house, and you know the drill. You start looking on the table and on the counter, and we've got this shelf by the door where we put our shoes on, and we put keys on top of that. So I look there, and I look all around, and then, I'm checking my own pockets a dozen times, and I still can't find my phone. And so I run back out, and I tell Jade, hey, can you call my phone? Maybe that'll help me. And, couch cushions, and, I'm looking around. So she starts calling my phone, and I hear a little vibration, I think, coming from somewhere in the kitchen. I go in the kitchen, and it's not on any of the counters. It's not on any of the surfaces. And I'm listening, and the sound is coming from inside the dishwasher. And sure enough, I open up the door, and there on the top rack next to my breakfast dishes, which I had placed in the dishwasher, is my cell phone that's ringing, and Jade is calling me. I forget stuff. But it's not just little things that I forget. Sometimes I forget even important things. So a much more embarrassing story. A couple years ago, Kara and I, it's the middle of the day, we're running around doing some errands, and I had to swing by the elementary school. I can't remember if I was dropping something off or picking something up. It's the middle of the day, so it's not at the beginning or end of when school's getting in or out. So I parked there, and I look back, and Kara has fallen asleep in the car. Now, it's a really nice day. It's not hot or cold. So I thought, okay, I'll just crack the windows, and I'll run inside and pick up or drop off whatever it was I was picking up or dropping off. And then I'll be right back out, and she'll never know the difference. So I go inside and do whatever I had to do, and somebody asks me a question, and it starts a conversation, and I don't know how long I was there, 10 or 15 minutes or whatever, and it's just in that conversation, and for those few minutes, I forgot that I had a daughter that was in the car. Now, if you had come up to me and asked me, do you have a daughter who is out asleep in the car? I would, oh yes, and I would have been horrified. It's not like that I actually forgot she existed, but somehow in my mind, I became so focused on what I was doing, I was living in that moment as if she wasn't out in the car. So, finish the conversation, start walking out the door. As soon as I walk out the door, I see the car, and I realize what I've done. My heart starts beating, And I'm like, oh no. Is she going to be like screaming, crying in the car because she woke up and she doesn't know where Daddy is? And, so I rush over to the car, and thankfully, of course, she's sleeping peacefully there in the car. Thank you, Jesus. Okay. But I forget stuff. We forget stuff. Even important things like spiritual things. It's not like we forget that the God of heaven sent his son Jesus, who lived and died and rose again for us. It's not like we don't think that ever happened, but sometimes we get so focused on whatever it is we get focused on that we live as if Jesus Christ had not lived and died and rose again for us. We forget. God is gracious, and God has given us reminders. Now, because of my ADHD, I know that I need reminders. So, like when I was in college, up until I met Jade, I used to write things on my hand because I would see it right there. You couldn't ignore it and forget about it. And then she's like, I don't think that ink is good for your skin. So I had to, come up with other ways. But if you go to my desk is messier than I really want it to be, but I'm afraid that if I take that file and I file it away, where I can't see it, I'm going to forget about it. So there's files and folders and sticky notes and things all over my desk to try to remind me of those things that are important. Well, God has given us some reminders of the things that are most important. If you'll go with me to Exodus 13. So just a little background, this is the story of the Exodus. Before this moment, God's people were there suffering the brutality of slavery, and the Bible says that God himself heard their cries and remembered his covenant. He remembered his promises. So of course, he calls Moses. Burning bush, sends Moses to Egypt, talks to Pharaoh, let my people go. There's these plagues, and God is in the process of delivering 1 million people from slavery. And what is amazing to me is on that very night, so you think about getting 1 million people and their belongings and their livestock out of an oppressive empire. On that very night, God takes time to institute a religious ceremony that will be a reminder. Exodus 13, starting in verse 3. And Moses said to the people, remember this day. So this is the night of the Exodus. Moses said to the people, remember this day in which you went out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you out of this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. On this day you are going out in the month of Abib. And it shall be when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you a land flowing with milk and honey, that you shall keep this service in this month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there shall be a feast to the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and no leavened bread shall be seen among you, nor shall leaven be seen among you in all your quarters. And you shall tell this to your son in that day, saying, this is done because of what the Lord did for me when I came up from Egypt. It shall be as a sign to you on your hand and a memorial between your eyes, that the Lord's law may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Lord brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this ordinance in its season from year to year. I mean, just think about this. This is happening on that very night. 1 million people, you got to get them out of Egypt, all their stuff, all their livestock. And God tells Moses, you need to tell them about this religious ceremony that we're going to call Passover and how they're going to keep it next year and the year after and the year after and the year after. Doesn't God have some more important things to do on that night? Couldn't this wait till later? I mean, are they really going to forget? I mean, think about all that's just happened. You have, the sun being darkened and the Nile turning red, and they're about to go. God's going to be a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day. The sea is going to part. And are they really going to forget all that? But God seems very concerned that they will. And so in the midst of that, the imminence of that moment, the busyness of that moment, he takes time to say, this is what we're going to do to remember that any of this ever happened. Year after year after year after year, so that we don't forget. Fast forward with me. Not that many weeks after that moment, the Israelites are gathered around Mount Sinai. God speaks to them. The mountain shakes. There's thunder and there's fire. Moses goes up. They hear God's own voice declare the commandments. Surely you wouldn't forget that. Right? So Moses goes up. And while Moses is there, it seems to be taking a little bit of time. Aaron gathers all the people. Give me your gold and your silver. They make the calf. And notice what Aaron says after they make the calf. This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt. And you know what the people don't do? Well, that's not true. We remember what happened. It wasn't a calf, it was Yahweh. God brought himself out with his presence in his hand. That's not what they do. They start singing and dancing and worshiping a calf as if Yahweh himself had not just delivered them from Egypt. How soon we forget. And maybe you've experienced it too, right? You've got that mountaintop moment where somehow God works and intervenes in your life. He touches your heart. There's this miracle or this experience, and you think, after this moment, things will never be the same. I'm never going to forget this. I will always remember how I experienced God right here on this mountain. And just a few steps later down in the valley, what do? We forget. And if you read through the Old Testament, there's actually reminders everywhere. God is constantly trying to do things to remind his people. Why does he have them put tassels on their clothes? Why does he have them keep the seventh-day Sabbath? In fact, if you read it, it's really interesting. The account there in Exodus says the Sabbath is a reminder of creation. The account in Deuteronomy, which, by the way, is the second giving of the law, it's a reminder of everything. Moses is reminding the people of everything that's just happened. You read the account in Deuteronomy about the Sabbath. God says, remember the Sabbath because you were in Egypt. I delivered you. You were slaves, and I brought you out with a mighty hand. Therefore, keep the Sabbath, because remember, you couldn't keep the Sabbath. Did Pharaoh give you a day of rest? No, Pharaoh commanded you to work. Now I'm commanding you, this is the type of God I am, I'm commanding you to rest. So when you rest, remember that you used to be slaves. So God told them, write the law on your hand, your forehead, put it on your doorpost. They were to remind themselves continuously because God knew that we are spiritually forgetful people. So fast forward with me. Almost 1,500 years has passed since the original Passover. And Jesus, on the very night that he will be betrayed, he is hours away from trial and accusation and scourging and ultimately death, from the weight and guilt of the world being laid upon him. And what does he do on that very night? Just like the Passover, he takes time to institute a religious service that will serve as a reminder. I mean, he's about to save the whole world, right? Doesn't he have more important things to do? Can't we worry about this later? Are they really in that much danger of forgetting? Well, actually they were, weren't they? I mean, just go 1 hour ahead, maybe a few, after this meal, and what's Peter doing? I'll never deny you, everybody else, but I will die. And there he is, denying Jesus, using language to emphasize how much he had never had any part with that man and never knew him. How soon we forget. So Jesus says, "This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." He knew. We get distracted, we get busy, we get out of focus. He knew. It's not that we would forget that it actually happened. We would always know in our brain. But he knew that each and every one of us were in danger of living as if it hadn't. Going about our lives and our days and our business and everything as if God himself had not been crucified for us and risen again. So he says, do this in remembrance of me. And that's what we're here for. This is God's way of refocusing, reminding us of what really matters, what's really important, what it is all about. And it's a tangible way to do that so that we don't forget and live as if. As we close here this morning, I want to just read for you a passage about a reminder that God has given himself. Can a mother, Isaiah 49, 15 and 16, can a mother forget the baby at her breast? Well, maybe a father, right? Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has born? Think about that attachment, that love that a mother feels. Though she may forget, I will not forget you. See, I've engraved you on the palms of my hands. My love for you is so unforgettable. But I've even given myself reminders on the palms of my hands. Now just think about Jesus after the resurrection. Lived that perfect life, never gave in to temptation, stayed on the cross when he could have come down. He dies, atones for us, pays the price, shows the full extent of his love. He rises again, and at that moment, really, even though it still has to be played out in actuality, in that moment, the victory has been won. The tide has turned. And yet, when Jesus rises again, when Jesus rises from the grave, he doesn't do so with a body that is perfect and unblemished and unscarred, does he? What does Thomas say? Until I see with my eyes, until I can put my hands there, his hands and his side, I'm not going to believe. And he does that. Jesus, in his perfect glory and resurrection, still has the scars from the nails. Why? Why? Aren't they a reminder for all of eternity of God's love and the price that he would pay for us? They will forever declare the extent to which God himself would go in order to be with us and save us. So here at this time, we're going to celebrate together what Jesus has done through these symbols, through these reminders. Here in the Adventist Church, we have an open communion, meaning everybody is willing. Everybody is welcome. Anyone who is willing, who wants to take part, is welcome to participate. And we do something a little different in the Adventist Church. We take Jesus' words to follow his example after he washes his disciples' feet seriously. So we are going to wash one another's feet as a reminder of what Jesus did, that he himself washed the feet of Peter and Judas, that he served and gave his life.